Hi, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk Off the Podium. I have a friend, and I'm so excited to see this person because it's been a while. Yiğit Kolat is with me. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks a lot, Tigran. Thanks for having me.
It's so great. I really, in some ways, when I started this podcast, I was doing a mix of having people that I know and some people that I don't know from around the world. But recently, well, it's been a mix as well, but mostly it's been people that I don't know. So it's always nice to get someone that I know because it's just a different conversation, I think.
Yeah. It is interesting, right? The vibe it has.
Yeah.
When you have talk with friends. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Let's see how it will steer our conversation.
Well, first off, everything happening around the world now, this has been a big question I've been asking people. How are you dealing with the current situation? What have you been doing for the past 3-4 months? Are you composing? Are you teaching still during this time?
Yeah, I mean, it's weird times for sure. One thing for me, I of course got to spend lots of time with my family. Playing with my daughter Anuk, watching her grow up. It is when you're, as you know yourself, you're in your experience right now. It is when you're around constantly. It is you can see the growing up as this amazing process that is unfolding in front of your eyes. So I'm enjoying that a lot. Music-wise, I'm right now finishing up a project for guitarist Naeem Rahmani. And then on 29th, there will be a virtual premiere of a new piece of mine as a part of New Music Gathering conference. Mm-hmm. So this is performed by Seattle Modern Orchestra members. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I've been busy with these projects, and my 2-year tenure has just ended at University of Washington. Mm-hmm. So teaching part is also concluded. Yeah, it is interesting times.
Yeah, I know a lot about your works. I really enjoy them and everything that you bring to the musical world, to your thought process as a human being, thinking about everything happening around the world and bringing that into the musical world. We'll get into that. But I do want to talk a little bit about your upbringing in Turkey and, interest and passion for Western music.
Well, of course, we will discuss identity. I'm assuming it will come up.
Yeah.
And part of the Turkish identity, just like many other countries around it, is this has this element of dichotomy between East and West, and this attitude of measuring many things based on that. It's just so interesting. There is actual literature that considers the Ottoman court music or Anatolian folk music in general. There's a literature that considered that repertoire as somewhat lesser quality because of the fact that the polyphony didn't develop, hasn't developed in this in the historical context, in the historical flow of things. Of course, there are many reasons for that, but the polyphony as this Western high culture, sign of Western high culture, was something that kind of plagued Turkish musical life, as far as I could observe. Even in my upbringing, we would have, we would be brought into these discussions of, how about taking folk music and making it polyphonic, as if these musical materials by themselves are simply, just basic, unimportant things, and they could only be given new layers as via adding 3 more parts or something like that, but I mean, I was born in Ankara, the only musician in the family, so I went to the conservatory there. It is a very intense traditional musical training, all the fun stuff like counterpoint and fugue. And I studied piano. I started with piano actually, and then moved to composition. It was when I look back, actually, I find certain advantages about this kind of traditional conservatory training. There are disadvantages too, for sure. But you end up dealing with all these.
And what you say about folk music and trying to make it something that it probably shouldn't be, or it could be, but it doesn't have to be. But it's interesting how it's not just in music, in so many other parts in the world, the way we think about things. We think that if just because it's not part of our culture, it's not good enough, so we have to do something with it to make it good enough and worthy enough to be in this space. You know,
Absolutely.
At times it's frustrating and tough to think about things like that, right? Things don't have to be the same as us to be great, you know, or to be very good, or, you know, of good quality. And folk music is so beautiful, and it's been sort of an inspiration to you, right? Folk music. Did you grow up with folk music? Did you listen to folk music growing up?
Oh yeah, for sure. My father is particularly a good singer. I have the composer voice when I sing; it's just horrible. But my father is a good singer, so he would sing folk music. And you know, the interesting thing is, I guess that would, that's actually something CV talked about, knowing each other, how it's. As to the conversation, this is something we had talked about together in terms of when I think about Turkish folk music, it is not just, I think Turkish as more like there's this Turkic communities in Anatolia rather than a central identity. It is, it's an amalgam of so many things, including Armenian folk music, that comes from the Eastern Anatolia, including Greek folk music. So it is it's like the cuisine too, right? You know, it is so fascinating how this synthesis, despite all the horrifying past, the culture manages to survive and get together and create new colors. And I grew up with that, and it's just, it's not only listening to it and somehow it appearing somehow in my music, or I approach it as a kind of amateur musicologist way to the structures of it. Yes, that exists, but other than that, it's helps me thinking about my own identity too. What does that mean to be a Turkish composer, Turkish person? That is it a monolithic identity, or is it actually something that's fed by so many cultures around me?
Wow. That's amazing. That's a great way of putting it. And I know I'm going to jump really far ahead of what we're talking about now, but as an Armenian and as a friend that I've known you for a long time now, I have to ask about Edgar Manas, and we've talked about Edgar Manas before in person, off record, but a little bit about him and how he inspired your music, and specifically, I'm thinking about one piece, which, if you don't mind sharing and talking about it.
Oh, of course. Edgar Manas, I would say, in a sense of pedigree, what I'm from as Turkish composer, right? But in terms of what kind of music we're talking about talking about something now loosely described as new music or contemporary music. In Turkish context, Edgar Manas is one of the first people who approached to especially the court music and folk music elements, and also the religious music elements in the. I won't say necessarily. I never take Edgar Manas as this a practitioner of let's make it westernized, or let's make it something somewhat closer to. If you consider, sacred melodies, let's make it closer to the Catholic setup. I don't think he ever thought that. It's more about creating a amalgam of them, because he knew the repertoire very well in terms of the Western music repertoire, and what he gathered from it in his music found, created a platform for these. I said amalgam, but it's not necessarily synthesis. This kind of buzzword in Turkey, especially. Oh, let's synthesize Western and Turkish music. No, not that. Actually, that attitude, that very special attitude, you can find it, especially we talked about his piano pieces. You can very clearly see in the piano pieces, especially in the Prince Islands. So yeah, I mean, as a student, me and my colleagues, we found some of his scores via an amazing professor of us, İlhan Baran, and we studied it, we played it. It's really, it was really fascinating, to know his music and also know that where we come from, actually. Again, that relates to the identity thing, because, and also Edgar Manas, one important note would be the official orchestration of Turkish national anthem. He did it. So it is, of course, I revisited this, his music and the entire cultural environment surrounded him in a piece I wrote. As you know, it was named after one of the pieces from his Prince Islands album, piano album. And the idea there was I was curious about, his experience too, because he's one of the, of course, him and his family, was one of the families that stayed in Turkey after the genocide. So what was his experience? And of course, after the war, after the, how it's called, creation of the Republic, the political environment wasn't exactly the same that created all these nightmare. I won't say it was the most open anyway. So that's why you could see many Armenian families not using the, for example, I don't know if it's the correct word, suffix, yan. Yeah, I mean, they would change it. There's always this, of course, the sensitivity about this. But back to Edgar Manas, I was curious, and it's also I found kind of want to reflect my own experience in my history learning in Turkey. So what I did was with that pieces, I took sounds from the piece, from Edgar Manas's piece, and there's a method that is called kind of data banding. It is basically fancy word. The idea is that you open up an audio file as a very raw format, and then you can actually see a certain representation of the sound using a particular notation, particular sequence of letters and numbers. I found I took every letter that comprises the word genocide in Turkish soykırım, SOY, and when I synthesized the sound, it was actually changed. It was distorted, and that was basically my analogy to a distorted perception of the history. That is, caused by politics of denial, which desperately tries to take one single word out of the history, and that's the environment I grew up in. Actually, when we took our history classes, that was it. That one single word being taken out from the information, and therefore creating a distorted sense of history. So I want to address that in the piece too.
Yeah, you're passionate about politics, and I mentioned that earlier. And using that sort of somehow, I don't know what the best way to describe it is. It's part of your music. It's part of who you are. And how much has this affected negatively your career? How much has it positively impacted your career? Because speaking out about things that some people don't want to hear about, it's not always a safe safe way to build a career. And I'm assuming there's a lot of backlash. If you want to talk about that, or you just generally say things that you want to say about, because I know it's not an easy thing to talk about. So I want the listeners to understand this, because there are listeners who might not even know too much about the history of Armenians and Turks, and for centuries living together in this region, and genocide and all of this that happens. And now at this present moment, you and I are friends, and I'm sure there are many others, Turkish and Armenians, that are friends, but there's also millions that are very hateful towards each other, I should say. So understanding all this, and it's really tough to talk about, I'm sure, from your perspective, and even writing something like that about Edgar Manas and talking about this, it's already a tough thing. So I really appreciate that you're willing to talk about all of this. So a little bit about that and how it has impacted and affected your career.
Of course, no. I mean, I believe it is very important to, as newer generations, who are haunted, let's say, by the history. We have to, talk about it. And when I look at myself as a Turkish person, I have to face, that part of the history. But in terms of, and I have to note this, I'm not the only Turkish composer who has this, or Turkish artist who has this sensibility, and they're, from our generation to, like, one example I would bring up, Zeynep Gedizlioğlu. She's active in Germany right now. She wrote a piece, as far as I remember, for orchestra called Aghat. So, that was directly related to Armenian genocide. So, in general, this topic and other topics, basically, what I'm trying to say is, some of us, I don't want to, again, single out myself, but, politically informed, or historically informed, I don't know what you would call it. I was listening to this conversation, between several American composers, and one of them said, if you want to do something that is politically informing, get out, call your representative, something like that. And I said that, and this was before actually this recent situation, this recent revisiting the all this, revisiting is actually not a good word for that, but what would be the way to say that? I'll just generally say recent conditions that forces these people in the United States to think about the politics around race. Let's put it that way. This was before that, and I was thinking, I couldn't help thinking, like, how lucky you are. If you're just able to call your representative, and that is your definitive political action, that's just amazing. But now it is not, right? Right now, it is not enough to call you need to get out. You need to say Black Lives Matter. Like, so but you and me, we lived in this kind of constantly boiling political environments forever.
Yeah.
I'm not saying in the United States just new, of course. I mean, all these pains, all this history of, suppression. I mean, this is not new, of course. But, what I'm saying is, I guess the center identity here, whites in Turkey, is what you would call white Turk. And I'm definitely one of them. The center identity sometimes confuses its own comfort with what's actually going on in the environment. And there's, at some point, that comfort is destroyed because, it is so unjust and unfair that one particular center self is totally comfortable and rest is suffering. So we end up in this kind of situations. I'm sorry, maybe I am totally going out of your the question you asked, but what I'm trying to say is that at some point you don't think of your career.
Yeah.
So what, and also you don't believe that, writing piece doesn't change anything. Of course. I mean, of course, right now, is the best thing to do is get out and, join a protest, do something. But I believe as artists, what we do is, we still have this responsibility to leave our own marks and create these warnings about history, visiting them, reminding them, because otherwise, because art provides a very particular medium to do so. I mean, you can read a historian's book, okay, I mean, of course, you will learn lots of stuff, but, it is a different thing to look at an artwork, to an artwork that relates to the to history in a particular way. That's a different perspective, and that is, it reminds me Stalin's word. If 1 million people dies, it's statistics. If one person dies, it's tragedy. We are interested in tragedy of 1 million, maybe, as artists. Visiting them, zooming into them. I guess that perspective is important.
Wow, that's very well said, Yiğit. A couple of things I want to say. First is that I really appreciate that you're doing this and talking about this, and I said it earlier, but also that you're so articulate and well-spoken in English, because English is actually, is it your third language or fourth language?
It's my second language.
Really? Is English your second language?
Yeah.
I thought you spoke, it was Turkish, French, and then...
No, it's there was a time my French was better, but I'm now working on it every day. Yeah, English is the second.
Okay.
But thank you.
Either way, you're very well spoken. And for those who don't know, and I know you're very humble and you don't like to talk about these things, and you don't mention them often, but you've had extreme big success with music competitions. You won first prize, I think, at the Takemitsu competition, Takemitsu Award, I think it was called, and also a prize winner at the Queen Elizabeth competition. So you're very well accomplished, and I know a lot of young composers listening to this, they're like, well, what's the formula? How do you win a competition? How do you get to that next place? And you've been very good at being accomplished in this medium. So what does it take to actually even prepare for a competition, to win a competition? How have you been so successful? What advice would you give to young composers?
Oh man, this is a hard question right now for me. It wouldn't be 5 years earlier, because and it's a great question. I assume because of the nature of competitions and what they actually mean, I ended up thinking about it a lot after my experiences. Of course, I mean, for young composers, for composers who want to gain experiences. I mean, they create a highway for certain experiences you wouldn't get otherwise. I mean, thanks to Takemitsu, I get to work with Tokyo Philharmonic, which was an amazing experience, which wouldn't be possible otherwise. So there's absolutely, of course, that's way. And you also get to meet with, amazing people, your colleagues, and you create these relationships that would put this competition part away, it gives you this learning opportunity. And I'm not saying it just because it's a nice thing to say about it. Of course, there's an ego part to competition. Of course, you like to, you get the phone call and you're like, yeah, this is awesome. I want to do this more. But once that is away, and once certain practical things about competitions, like, young composers, how it's called, pursuing them for new experiences, I believe composers at some point should, drop it, because also it's competition, sending a piece to a competition and winning that also means that, and I'm saying that as a person who also sits in jury positions in certain cases, it also means that you need to be in a certain kind of middle of the curve, in terms of what you write. Say if your notation is completely, personal, and if your music is not, the composition itself is not following certain attitudes in terms of form, say, I'm not saying form, labeling form, but in terms of like developing form, etc. There's a big chance, even though the composition is very original, you might not make it in, because this kind of very personal attitudes give little room for the jury to, to study it in a certain number of parameters, and no one has actually honestly has time to really analyze anyone's piece. So at some point when in your career, when your approach to things, to form, to notation, to instrumentation, when it gets to a certain point, very personalized point, I guess that's the time to drop the pursuing competitions, even though your ego just pushes you inside and, apply to this, do this too. Kind of stuff. That's why actually, if you right now check out my website, you'll see that I don't have any mention of competitions, because at some point it becomes, you feel like, man, I don't want to define my practice with these, prizes, even though in academic environment, of course, it is important. Of course, it's, a show, say a young composer is applying and she wants to see who she's going to work with, and these list of experiences are important. But if you are in a kind of freelance mode like I am right now, I don't see any practical reason in my phase, in my current point in the journey. So that's the situation with me.
Your website is awesome. I mean, I will put a link down here and people can check it out. But I just went to it today. I like to have the website of the artist just as reference. And I'm like, is Yiğit's website hacked right now? Because you literally had 3 sentences about what your long bio was about 3 sentences. Your short bio was 1 sentence. That was awesome.
Yeah, it feels hacked for sure. Yeah, but it's about that too. Basically, what defines me as an artist, what defines you as an artist. Because also we have such a limited definition of success, especially in music, because the competition culture actually comes from, as the performance, which has much easier ways to evaluate, because everyone's playing this first concerto by Chopin, of course. I mean, but with composition, there's so many different materials, different things in effect, and then you have, again, back to the identity thing, you have the composers who belong to the central identity being much more luckier, and much certain opportunities much more readily available to them versus others. So here it is the white identity. In Turkey, again, it was my identity. It was much more difficult for a Kurdish composer, let's say, to get to where, to reach to the opportunities what I would easily reach. And similar here. So that's also another thing definitely to be discussed. Of course, I can only, I can't get much deeper in it because I never really get into the organizing a competition or anything, and sometimes you feel like everything is, it is, you design everything based on certain equality, but then the overall culture affects it, So all that stuff, I guess everything we do, we need to visit identity at some point, and how it affects our environment in general.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll come back to it a little bit later, but there's just so many things to talk about. And I remember all our talks when we would get together, have a drink, and just hang out and talk about music and life and politics and everything happening around the world. We would spend hours talking about these things, and this is a bit of a shorter format, so I'm trying to get to some key things that I've thought about, and I kind of feel like maybe I never asked you in person. So you were teaching at the University of Washington for 2 years, and you have experience, teaching, maybe privately and other places. What's something that when you think of music education, especially at the college level, what are things that come to mind where you're like, oh, I wish I had some kind of a power where I was the president of the college or dean of the music department and I would change these things, whether it's adding a class or taking some classes out, I don't know, just something about things that you've thought about that you would like to implement that aren't working currently in the college music education system.
Oh man, that's a mighty question. Well, one interesting thing in my experience at the University of Washington last 2 years, I had this, I was giving this liberty to construct my classes, and I'm really, it was an amazing experience, and that led to different explorations, not different from what I received in my own. Learning. That is thinking composition not as a Western construct, right? But of course, big question is like, for example, if you're going to use Japanese court music, how are you going to do it? Like not as the main thing, but not as one of the elements. So that was, of course, that is something I would say a musicologist's work, right? Maybe in conjunction with a theorist, just like distilling a pedagogical environment, like counterpoints, out of repertoire, in order to give the young composer the ability of working in a limited environment, which I enjoyed a lot, because you always end up with working with limited environment. There's no complete freedom. That's impossible. So how can you create that kind of pedagogical structures, say, with other, musical traditions of the world? I, very superficially experimented on that, but I feel like it was somewhat successful. To talk about and think about form, not in terms of labels, but as this flow that has to do a lot with the short-term memory and how that appears in different cultures. Is important. It was very important, or how they differ, because there are so many examples where one example I would give, for example, the Mevlevi ayins, the music of the Sufi tradition that comes from Rumi. Some of those music they use in the rites, it doesn't necessarily have this particular attitude that you see in the Western formal thinking, that to reach to somewhere, to certain future goal. Some of these music just flow in a very small time frame. So if I could do something, I would absolutely start an initiative to use different musical cultures, in a pedagogical way, a distilled way, and creates, means to learn from these cultures, just like we learn from Western musical, what was wrongly called, I guess, classical music culture, common periods in let's say, 18th century counterpoint classes. So I guess that would be something I would totally go after.
And that's a great point, because, when we think of composition, when anyone, even someone who's not very familiar with music, when you hear the word composition, for some reason, right away, you associate that with Western classical music or Western music. But the reality is, composition, if we were to describe it that way, it has been around for, far longer, and in parts of the world that mostly don't even associate with Western classical music. You might, folk music or other words that would describe it are still composers, are still composing, but for some reason they don't get to have that title. It's in some ways it's so sad. And one thing I was thinking about, I had Wadada Leo Smith, who is a jazz trumpet player. He probably doesn't even like that terminology, but he was on the podcast and he was talking about creative music. He kind of likes that terminology, even for jazz or even for improvisation. He just likes describing what he's doing as creative music, and I thought that was a very cool way to describe his music.
Creating that's interesting. I mean, improvisation too, for example. Like, how come improvisation is not a how to put this, is considered as somewhat loose way of musical expression in certain circles? It's so sad that it's considered that way. Whereas there could be, again, a pedagogy created around different practices of improvisation from different cultures. This is an interesting and very very deep topic, I would say.
Yeah, and these are the topics that we could go on and talk about for hours. I want to talk about a little bit about your the way you approach composition and form, and writing for a big symphony, a big orchestra, or writing for maybe a quintet or small chamber ensemble. What's the process, or is it different every time you approach a piece? I mean, what do you go through? What's the routine, if there is a routine?
That's a great question. It changes, in every piece, basically. And I guess I enjoy that surprise element of it too, because there's a point, sometimes that point comes very late to very close to deadline, and I don't like it when it happens, but there's a point you really feel what a piece, as if the piece itself becomes a certain entity by itself. And it's not a metaphysical thing. It's just, I generally work on, I'm interested in extra musical materials. And as I do the research around it, and research on the ways I could implement or reflect the extra musical material, maybe extra compositional would be better, because it's in terms of like it being outside the composition I'm working on, because sometimes that material is, as we discussed, a folk song, but that research starts actually building the piece, and at some point piece basically I'm able to tell what kind of mode of communication I need with this, be it notation, be it orchestration, of course, right? And one example is, for example, this piece called "Messenger of Sorrows." And the piece basically, when I start the piece, it was in a sense a reaction to a Turkish offensive to a Kurdish city. And I'm not going to the details of it, but basically the concept around it forced me to change the notation no idea what completely. So I started with a very complex notation, which basically via a tool, using a graphic editing tool, I transformed that image. What happened was first you would it would get more less intelligible, I would say, less what's the word? Readable. I'm trying to find the word. I can't find right now, but basically at some point you would lose the sharp sign. You wouldn't know if it's sharp or natural. Then you would lose the pitch. You wouldn't know if it's F or A or G. So it would get more and more less visible in a sense, and it would transform to a image. As you turn the pages, and the last image would be this abstract image of what I perceive as fire and blood, and this distracted, destroyed, cityscape. And the entire process becomes a process of improvisation from a very particular notation to full free improvisation, but step by step, because you're losing information you can't read. So that was an example. For example, if the musical material finds its way to affect the compositional and conceptual thinking.
Wow!
So, but it changes every time. For every piece, it's a different thing.
Yeah. And we could keep talking about music, but I want to change gears and ask you about some hobbies, some things that you do outside of music. I know a few of them. I don't want to mention it. I don't know if you want to talk about it, but go ahead and share with us.
Well, we should do a little chess game sometimes. I'm into chess as you are.
Yeah.
Nowadays, of course, again, the environment, we are looking forward to do some outdoor stuff at some point, but, waiting for the right time. I mean, hobbies, it's interesting. I never thought about I guess develop weird interest every once in a while. Recently, I'm revisiting this old computer of my childhood, Commodore 64, and basically nerding out around its sound chip, like how the music it created shaped my childhood. So I'm playing around it, like how can I it's not composition, but actually out of just curiosity, how that machine made sounds, and how composers worked around it, how sound engineers worked around it. So this kind of suddenly appearing intellectual interests kind of become hobbies for me. What else? I guess I know it sounds really boring, but it's what it is, I guess.
I thought you might. Well, I'll just say it. I thought you might mention the weightlifting.
Yeah,
because you do some weightlifting.
Oh well, I couldn't do it for 3 months, so I can't. I can't even mention it now. I'm trying to dig it. I'm sorry, bury it somewhere in my mind, as if it never happened. But yes, I enjoy that for sure. Yes, it's really fun.
Well, another thing is I really like to know what other types of music you listen to other than, your, area of expertise, which you are, focused on, you listen to and learn from, but just other things that most people might not think that you listen to, but you actually do.
That's interesting too, because the problem I'm having with this question is nowadays I try to do like these random searches of different so to say genres. For example, I was interested in I absolutely have this this new interest in metal in general.
Oh wow!
As a culture as well, and as how it shapes itself in different cultural environments.
Wow.
It is so fast. It's like jazz, and it's just like jazz. It has this big stereotype about how it's performed, but then as you get into it, you just explore so many things. So there's this website and basically an encyclopedia of metal repertoire. So I've been going through random there, and I forgot the name of this band, and I found, for example, one group from Hungary that sounds like that. I mean, it was so Bartokian. Now this is my conservatory brat parts trying to distill it into that, but it's fascinating, and I hope to get from how it's fascinating kind of how it's called distanced place to a better place to enjoy it better, because at some point you need to drop your earlier how it's called considerations or expectations about any music, and just dive without so basically that's what I've been doing recently in terms
Send me a link of that
music.
band.
Oh yeah, totally. I took a note. I need to find for you, but yeah, totally. This is just amazing.
Yeah, I would love to hear it. And lastly, I hope to have you back in the future, but I can't believe it's close, almost an hour that we've been on this. Life-changing moment, a musical life-changing moment, and a personal life-changing moment.
I mean, birth of my daughter.
Yeah.
You know the feeling very well.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah. It is. And it's one of the things that are so most commonly said at the same time so personally different for everyone. Yeah. I mean, it's even difficult to describe, the changes it creates in you as a human being. But definitely it's, it's before Anuk and after Anuk for me, It is quite fascinating. Yeah.
Any professional, musical moments that stand out for you, whether it was from early childhood where you really realized where you were young and you realized this was your career, or anything in the recent years that really made a big impact on you musically?
I'm sure when we finish our conversation, I'll be walking out and I'm like, oh, that's it. I should have said that. Yeah. But so it doesn't come. I mean, there were many for sure. I mean, it just what happens is you get this bunch of peaks, and it's hard to pick one of them, and it's even hard to think one of them. But I could get to the earliest one, which relates to what I was mentioning as my nerdy hobby. My parents got me this computer, Commodore 64, and the first time I heard the music, that timbre, that was amazing. Another thing was, for the first time I started listening to, I don't remember what album was that, but listen to music, listening to the production, but not necessarily the content. I mean, of course you listen to content as well, but not like because I'm sure you're familiar with, classical musicians have a rather platonic way of listening, just this pure content. And how many times have you received horrible recordings, going on, and the kid goes like, oh, this is my recording is of my recital, just enjoy, and I can't even hear it, but first time I listened to production and paid attention to this spatiality, where the sounds come from, and all these details, that was a life change. It was like I was started using a part of my brain I never used before. Yeah. So yeah, I guess that's one of them.
Yiğit, it's been a pleasure. I miss hanging out with you.
Me too, man.
I hope we could see each other soon. It's always a great conversation, and one thing that is very special about your compositions, that each time I think a great composer is able to not only bring out emotional aspects of the music, which is great, but also make you think in the moment, or maybe sometimes even way longer, way later in your life, to really make you deeply think about what happened in that experience. And your music is truly an experience. And I love your work, and you're a dear friend, and I enjoyed having you finally on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Tigran Can. Same for me. Thank you so much. It was great to be with you.
Thank you. I'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Thanks for listening to Let's Talk Off the Podium. If you enjoyed this episode, please comment, share, and subscribe. Stay tuned for the next episode.